Scholars may debate, but besides our self-awareness and ability to moralize, humanity's most powerful characteristic is our memory. This power is double-edged, however. While our memory can pull us from the depths of despair as we recall something beautiful or empowering, it can also keep us trapped into moralizing cycles of pain if we can't clear the cache of our past traumas. Another occupational hazard of our memories is remembering incorrectly, whether it's innocuously reciting a misheard song lyric or a movie quotation you swore you'd heard right the first time, to the pointed, manipulative ways we can let our biases contour the account of events we witnessed till we get an unreliable, weaponized half-truth. The Forgotten City by Modern Storyteller is an incredible video game, and which has a lot to say about how and what we remember and what that says about what we perceive as truth. And not just what our brains automatically archive, but what we memorialize and choose to repeat about history for future generations. Memory in this game becomes an intentional conflation between what we think happened versus the curated selective report some use for their own ends. So let's get stuck into why this game, unlike The City, is unforgettable, and why philosophizing about its depths and meaning matters at all.
Of course you'd say that, but that's what your kind do, isn't it?
The Forgotten City started off life as a Skyrim mod back in 2015. It had a fully fledged story of about 68 hours and was downloaded over 3 million times. It even became the first mod to ever win an Australian Writers Guild Award. Now that alone is pretty sensational, and I could completely understand if the primary visionary Nick Pierce just decided to hang up his spurs and say, "Job well done." But he thought he could do even better with a real budget, pro voice acting, new assets, and all that big boy developer stuff, and so he just kinda did that. The full game released in 2021 and just recently came to Game Pass, where I wound up playing it. The game's first impression is gloriously Elder Scrollsian. Your character awakes with no memory of how you got there, awash on an unfamiliar lakeside with one person named Karen there to help fill you in the best you can. The dialogue tree zooms in to the same distance as Skyrim's and Oblivion's, and the music, bright environments, and character emotes feel just like playing Oblivion. You can even choose one of 4 starting characteristics, like being more stealthy or having more health. There's a familiar magic to it all, and it swept me away just like the incredible Elder Scrolls games before it. To the Forgotten City's credit, this game doesn't just replicate those games' ambiance, but gradually subverts it, turning joy to dread as you realize the enormity of the stakes here. Now, Karen informs you that she and Al, another survivor, don't quite know how they got here either, only that one minute they were undergoing some intense event like their boat sinking or fighting with someone, and then woke up here. Al has since gone off to search for answers in the nearby Roman ruins, but hasn't come back yet, and Karen sends you after him to make sure he's okay. Now, amnesia is a classic RPG trope for the player character, but the fact that it seems to afflict everyone marooned here is unusual. Even more interesting, it soon becomes apparent that you may not remember how you got here, but you remember more than anyone else does, and that will make you the primary mover and shaker of the whole story. While pursuing Al in the Roman ruins, you enter a portal that takes you to a time and place just outside of Rome after it burned to the ground in AD 64. The first person you'll meet is the friendly farmer Galerius. He'll give you a tour of the city and take you to meet its leader, Magistrate Sentius, who somehow has been expecting you. He reveals this all started because he learned that someone is about to break the Golden Rule. This Golden Rule is one of collective punishment, where if even one person does evil like theft, assault, or murder, an unknown force will effectively kill everyone in the city by turning them into gold statues. Sentius researched the rituals of the goddess Proserpina and discovered a way to create a portal for someone to travel back in time to prevent this barbaric end. Now that person appears to be you, a clearly out-of-place stranger called through the portal to save the day. You're then given multiple quest strands and asked to uncover who the perpetrator of this evil is and stop the damnation of all. No pressure, right? And though you'll have a couple instances of combat with a golden bow, the Forgotten City's primary weapon is your silver tongue. And you'll need it because all of the characters have unique motivations and require equally unique approaches to please and get what you need in order to progress. I almost never wanted to skip their dialogue with me, and I sat through minutes-long conversations over and over just soaking it all in. You know what's even more impressive? The lip syncing's not even that good, nor is the facial animation, and yet I still almost never wanted to skip anything. That alone is mind-blowing and a real testament to just how pleasant it is to sit back and let the game tell you a good story. As you engage the inhabitants of the city and learn their desires and personality traits, you'll also become just as fearful of breaking the Golden Rule as they are, and have to tiptoe around it just to get what you need to solve the very problem of someone breaking it very soon anyway. For example, if you steal medicine in hopes that it will save a poisoned woman, this counts as breaking the Golden Golden Rule, triggering a booming voice which orders bow-wielding statues to just take everyone out. You'll have a limited amount of time to escape this purge, though, by going back to the portal just as Cynthius opens it for the quote-unquote first time, drawing you back in and starting the loop all over again. The portal is not a one-time trip, though. You're the one who can go through endlessly and return to the past time and again, learning from past mistakes either by sins you must commit to achieve your ends, or ones that others commit in response to your investigation. If you've gotten as far as you think you can go in a particular loop, you can auto-fail by hitting someone or stealing something, so you can reset and try again. Now knowing the timings of other events, you can head off some disasters and get farther down the line of solving the mystery. The game incentivizes an every last drop mentality because each quest is so carefully leaned against the other like dominoes, cascading into the next in possibly disastrous ways you'll need to learn from. You're the only person in this loop that remembers everything that's happened though, and you get to keep all the items you acquired in the previous loops, even if acquiring them meant breaking the Golden Rule. There's an achievement for beating every quest on your first loop, but I could not tell you how this is possible, as certain solutions like stealing the elixir for the poisoned woman seem like the only way forward. Furthermore, because major events like an attempted suicide run on a timer that resets when each new loop begins, and how dialogue on new loops reflects that you tried to fix these things unsuccessfully before, it really isn't even a normal experience to get everything right in one go, as it takes all the fun out of the game's mechanics. So don't fret if you think you're playing the game badly because of how many loops it takes. It actually makes the experience much more rich. So while time travel can feel like the superpower that's changing the story, what's most important from a zoomed out narrative perspective is actually your ability to remember everything so that you can act more wisely every time through. The reason that memory is the true superpower in Forgotten City is because we aren't flailing around like the rest of the city's inhabitants, constantly unsure why everything keeps going wrong and seemingly incapable of changing it to overcome certain doom. We've got it so figured out, in fact, that even when you relate impossible prescience to these folks, they're often incredulous and distrusting that you would feign to know what will happen, even if you advise one person not to take refuge from an assassin in a nearby shrine because it will soon collapse, effectively saving their life. It's not until the dust has literally cleared on such an event that people begin to see how important your ability to know and remember is. You're not just a master of the past you keep reliving, but also the future in a way, once it finally comes to pass for good. You're a prophet, sage, and seer, a clairvoyant. Okay, I'll put the thesaurus away now. Now, as you try to uncover who or what's behind the city's bizarre setup, you'll encounter several characters who are really struggling with the revelations about their new lives in the city under this Golden Rule. While in search of a tablet that's needed to unlock the impenetrable temple at the center of the city, you'll encounter an Egyptian who's adamant that the tablet be destroyed since it blasphemously suggests that his gods are copies or analogs of the gods from previous cultures like the Mesopotamians. Various tablets and tomes in the city suggest that all gods and religions exist to some extent and are built one upon the other, changing forms as cultures shift, at least insofar as the cultures that had lived in the Forgotten City. I'm reminded of the quotation, "History is written by the victors," and if you consider being still alive the victory, then that saying applies here too. Whatever culture is currently in vogue is in charge of naming of the gods or the function those gods represent. The Egyptian you meet laments that when the Greeks came to be, they wiped away all mention of his gods like Osiris from the monuments and obelisks around the city and replaced them with Hades and the other members of the Grecian pantheon. He finds some comfort when the Romans do the same to the Greeks, but acknowledges that the cycle is just continuing over and over again. Just like your cyclical time looping, cultures have been writing and rewriting this place's history long before you got here. But the Egyptian's primarily aghast that the tablet you're both in search of suggests that his culture also plagiarized previous cultures to make their own. Now, anyone who knows much history knows this is not how these specific religions and cultures really interacted. Egypt as an empire predated the Greeks by over 2,000 years, and they only overlapped by about 400 years before Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 332 BC. Beyond similarities in function where gods rule the dead or cause natural phenomena, which is, part of every culture ever, there aren't many one-to-one comparisons to be made about the laws or scopes of the philosophies from the Egyptians to the Greeks to the Romans and so on. So instead, the game posits a pseudo-fantastical rendering of the world a la the Assassin's Creed series that suggests that all religious beliefs have generated essentially in response to understanding the same core gods and goddesses, or at least the concepts of them, which just means changing the names and emphases as they're recorded by different people in different times. The game seems to inconsistently allow you to voice either your belief in these higher powers or a lukewarm moral relativism, but at least it suggests better worldviews than it ultimately endorses. For instance, when speaking with the Egyptian having a crisis of faith over the tablet, you suggest that it's at least a good thing that he lived a good life because of a belief system, even if the tenets of that belief system didn't turn out to be as true as he'd hoped. Later on, a conversation you have with a philosopher can go south if you're too direct and certain that you can use an objective moral standard to determine good and evil. If you say, yes, there's one standard I apply and that will guide me truly, he becomes disconcerted with your perceived arrogance and ends the conversation. But if you placate him with uncertainty as if your moral code can't always account for a situation's complexity, he's satisfied with your answers and gives you a little extra information that'll help you in your quest. This interaction, as well as the argument that you used to convince the Egyptian to question his own beliefs, kind of feel like bad faith mind games where one uses just enough religious jargon and concepts to make the true believer think that you're tuned in to what they believe, when you're really just kind of manipulating them into the same faith state the doubter is in. I don't dig that the game's dialogue choices confine you to this viewpoint sometimes so that it feels like clear authorial overreach, as in the case of the philosopher, so I had to use my real-world superpowers of memory and save reloading to try the conversation again to get the outcome I wanted. This didn't make for good gameplay, nor does it reward the player for being honest. You don't know this guy well enough to know which answer would even placate him, so it's not even a fun test of how much attention you've been paying to his words. But at least you suggest to the Egyptian that if something can be destroyed by truth, then it deserves to be destroyed by the truth. The core logic is defensible and doesn't rely on you playing into the author's belief system to get what you want out of the game, which feels kind of manipulative. So while I don't think the Forgotten City is always honest about the intentions of his dialogue options, it's at least in the ring, swinging at the heavyweight topics. Remembering everything in each time loop is the most important aspect of your abilities, but the game also asserts that what we choose to report to others is just as important as our own personal remembrance in the first place. Many of the city's residents actually believe that the cultists, the game's name for Christians, are the ones to blame for burning Rome to the ground, a salacious lie from Emperor Nero, their chief tormentor. But next to no one in the game knows this because they're representing the Roman people, hearing this information from the person in power and just accepting it. So the lie is out there and spreads like, well, wildfire. So our beliefs and memory are constructed in some sense, or at least ratified internally before we regurgitate them, true or otherwise, and we have to be aware of the implications of that power. Now, in the game's world, the newer cultures have cobbled together a cafeteria culture, taking what they've liked from their predecessors. It's certainly something we all do all the time in our real-world cultures and in our daily interactions. White lies, sins of omission, and all the rest permeate our conversations and justify our deceptions because we assume that they aren't hurting anyone enough to matter, or maybe they aren't just choices that freely traffic kind of in and around truth. And I appreciate that the Forgotten City gets you thinking about why this matters. And I don't think it's any coincidence that this game's script was the one I was in the middle of writing when my grandfather died very suddenly. My grandfather had been house-ridden with back pain for years, but he had no other ailments of note, so his recent passing came as quite a shock. We'd lost the man who'd helped me pay my way through college so I could acquire the basic editing and writing skills I'd later need to make things such as this channel. He himself had a doctorate and several other degrees and had been a history teacher for nearly 50 years and a Sunday school teacher for nearly 35. He loved reading, crossword puzzles, the banjo, and performing musical productions for senior citizens. He was also very quiet and non-confrontational to the point of being hard to start a conversation with. I never really felt like we had an in between us as to what to talk about or have in common to really get a conversation going. And then one year shortly after an election, I'd been posting articles on Facebook from a certain political perspective that he did not share, and out of nowhere he posted a reply on one of my articles that basically said this kind of thing needs to stop. I was taken aback that this was the conversation he decided to start after so many years of not starting any.
Politics. I'd stay clear of it.
Unfortunately, this memory often clouds over all the better but less personal ones, probably because it was wildly uncomfortable and unresolved. I'd always hoped I'd figure out what to say one day to get a good rapport going, but never quite felt like I had an enemy or knew how to impress myself upon him. I even imagined a melodramatic scenario where one day his time would come slowly but surely, and I'd enter his hospital room, kneel down by his bed and take his hand, and we'd just know finally as two strong but silent types that we had made peace and that was all that matters, and would have a moment of seeing each other unfettered. This fanciful reconciliation never coming to pass in effect or actuality was unmooring for me. And so I turn over in my mind all the events in the Forgotten City, of being able to find all the wrongs and right them through my ability to know and plan ahead, so that friendships could be amended, lives saved, and dark existences brightened. And we expect to get a tick-down timer like the Forgotten Cities to enact our bucket list desires before we go, but we'd probably be shocked to know that had we lived purposefully and without fear before, we wouldn't need to make such a mad scramble at the end of it all. I regret that I never quite felt like my grandfather and I had this awesome moment thereafter to cancel out that strange flare-up years ago that was never mentioned again. But we really shouldn't be afraid of relationships with awkward snags in them. I can't pretend it also doesn't bother me a little bit how the last major conversation between he and my dad and I took a similarly awkward turn of disagreement, but I don't need to wish it away like it never happened or anything like that. An interesting choice I'd never heard before was that the pastor at my grandpa's funeral mentioned that should there be any unresolved conflict before he died, may it be forgiven and resolved.
And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful.
I got the message. Time travel and perfect memory don't exist, so it becomes paramount that I don't forget to forgive, and funnily enough, I have other grievances I could air, I guess, that frustrated me about our relationship, but telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth here would actually deface the monument to my grandfather to little to no end other than selfish pettiness. So I honor what is, how generous my grandfather was with getting me through school, his commitments to teaching and his family, his quirky sense of humor, and his wry laugh. Grandpa, I'm sorry I didn't really know what to say, and I may still not.
I'm not good with words.
But thanks for what you gave me, consistently and effectively. And when you're looking around the crowd for Grandma out there, don't be surprised if she's the first to say her trademark, ta-da, and surprise the hell out of you. But wouldn't it be funny if you finally got to surprise her instead? Let me know how that goes. I just want to say I'm proud to keep carrying on your name as one of my own. So rest in peace, Maurice. You will not be forgotten. Okay, we're back from the heavy stuff. Oh, I almost forgot. I was supposed to review a little bit more about the Forgotten City as a game. Man, being a wannabe pretentious think-tuber got me tripping, dog. The game's narrative is just simply an incredibly well-crafted mystery. The less abstract, gamey part of the, game is that it's just simply fun to play. In his lengthy Forgotten City analysis, Monty Zander called the dialogue trees people puzzles, and I really like that. Much like Deus Ex Human Revolution, you'll need to suss out the personality type of your dialogue partner and choose wisely from the options given to you to appeal to them to get items or info you need. And while these aren't really challenging, they are quite entertaining to engage in. Now, when you're not jawing, you'll be pawing around the Forgotten City looking for clues and items you can scavenge to help you back up top. Exploring the incredibly well realized and historically accurate city is also a pleasure and just echoes that sense of discovery that you get in games like BioShock, System Shock, and Prey 2017. Whether it's finding gold that's not owned finally and can be picked up without breaking the golden rule, used to bribe or pay someone for a needed service, or just finding an alternate path into a destination or even a brand new character, there are always tangible rewards to taking a break from progressing quests to see what lies in the dark corners of the earth. And hell, because the game is so well crafted, you can often incidentally find bits of evidence that will inform your quest tangentially anyway, in a manner that feels organic and unplanned, which is a really hard thing to pull off in a game that's obviously artificially constructed. And that's what the game does best, providing exquisite breadcrumb trails and a sense of pacing that builds tension and expectation for increasingly scary revelations about where you are, who's in charge, and whether there's any hope of escape. And once the revelations start hitting, they'll do so hard and fast, like who's whispering to you from inside the golden statues or whom you can actually trust in this place. It's not a horror game, but I definitely felt pretty isolated and kind of frightened at times, like a good cosmic horror story where the rug keeps getting pulled out from under you and you're left with no solid place to put your feet, even with the help of your enhanced abilities. It's a great seesaw power balance and it cut right to my core plenty of times. There are multiple endings and only one truly satisfying one in my opinion, and some have a really unintuitive order of steps to complete. But like the rest of the game, I was encouraged to look everywhere and find everything to help me make the best decisions and hopefully save the most people, if that's even possible. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, nudge. The Forgotten City is a testament to what a commitment to quality, even on a small scale, will get you. Absolutely everywhere. The game is well worth the awards and adulation, and best of all, it's a game you can just play and easily come to know why its reputation is so well deserved. You don't have to hype yourself up to keep caring or pretend it's better than it is because it's the latest AAA blockbuster and the production values are just melting your face. It's incredibly creative, well-paced, full of unique story arcs and interesting characters that you won't mind listening to for hours, and I can think of few other modern RPG-style games that do this so well besides maybe the recent Greedfall. But the Forgotten City is not just a great game because it's entertaining. It also makes you think about what constitutes truth and why it matters how we push our particular viewpoints. Memory is a superpower in this place because you can outwit death with your ever-increasing knowledge base. The Forgotten City asserts that we have this power in real life too, in terms of what we pass on to the next generation, how we frame history, how we pass on religious belief, what we remember, and how we choose to remember, because the truth is as much about what we say as what we choose not to say. It takes a lot to convince the Egyptian not to lose it when you blow his mind about the origins of his faith, but he fares much better than the rigid moral relativist philosopher, who's appalled if you answer his questions about right and wrong with any certainty. I've seen people react this way time and again in this age where we're all being encouraged to feel like the world's main character and dig our heels into our truth and not relent. So be careful out there. Speak truthfully, speak the truth fully, knowing that what you construct to deliver as truth is its own selective recall of sorts, its own memory superpowered trick, because we're discerning what is worth saying and worth remembering as truth all the time. The Forgotten City traffics in big ideas like this over and again, and it also just so happens to be really beautiful, really engrossing, and really fun. The Forgotten City is, in a word, unforgettable.
Consider this an invitation or a warning.